All right, so let's go ahead to Doug then as the next talk. So Doug, go ahead.
Okay, everybody hear me good?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about using Parsl to handle large agroecosystem data. And this is the team I've been working with, led by Professor Kaiyu Guan at the Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Sciences and Daniel Katz at the National Center for Supercomputing Applications. So the idea behind the agroecosystem monitoring is to obtain essentially ground truth data on crop distribution and health. And we're trying to build up a system starting from the small scale, working all the way up to large scale satellite monitoring for preferably the whole corn belt in the U.S. The leaf size monitoring done by human interaction, or field size monitoring by a UAV or some other short range imaging is fairly well implemented in several sites around the country, but there's a lot of missing data for like kilometer size and up monitoring. So this project aims to kind of fill in the meter to kilometer size, multiple fields, multiple farms monitoring on a fairly rapid time scale. And the way this is done is there's a hyperspectral monitor that's stuck on the back of a little, or stuck in a little aircraft, and that just flies back and forth across the fields, taking images, spectral images, as it flies along. And it's got about 470 channels going from 400 to 2500 nanometers, so visible to into the infrared. And the images are taken about every half meter. And other data that's also obtained during the flight is the angle to the sun, the angle, the camera's not always going to be pointing straight down because, airplanes wiggle around a little bit. So getting all of the different angles and tracking the atmospheric conditions and light conditions so that you can get a proper rendering of what's actually happening on the ground. And one of the primary products is this spectra that you get for each of the pixels, and you can see where the chlorophyll absorption is and the near infrared emission. Well, it's not really emission; it's reflection from plants. So you can be able to see where there's a lot of growth in plants, or a lack of plant material that's currently existing. So it goes along and catalogs all of these spectra. So there's about 1,500 image pixels across the array. It's a linear array, and they can get up to about 40,000 field acres per hour. So you figure, okay, so there's 470 channels, 1,500 pixels. So you're getting about 2.6 megabytes per scan, which comes out to about 5.3 gigabytes per kilometer. So you can imagine the data volumes grow very quickly. So need to bring in HPC to be able to really process this in any reasonable fashion. And here's just a quick overview of the data processing workflow. So you can imagine that you get the data is essentially effectively a linear strip, but then you have to do all of the geometric corrections, and you actually end up with something that's kind of wiggly because the plane's not always aimed straight down. It's not always perfectly level, not always at the exact same altitude, things like that. So you end up with a very interesting looking data product. And I'm going to focus on one of the things because we use Parsl to manage the workflow, but also inside some of the individual tasks, we're using Parsl to handle the massive data volume, because some of these things are just, the data files are just huge. So one of them is removing the noise from the spectra. The spectra is expected to be fairly smooth, just because of the nature of the reflection from plants, but you get some noise from time to time, and it's easily correctable. And doing a single pixel takes a fraction of a second But if you've got a 27 gigabyte file that has an immense amount of spectra to correct, it could just take a long time to do on a single core machine. And 27 gigabyte file is small for some of these. Do a full day's run, you're going to have terabytes of data, and it will just be immense to try and go through. So the idea is to take the data and break it up in space. So each box is a chunk of data that we extract from the initial data set and send off to a Parsl job to process it, and then bring it back and then reassemble the data as it returns from the individual Parsl functions. And it's reduced the runtime by about 80% for a single core versus a 24 core machine, mostly because of just reading the data initially. Is that the IO overhead is currently fairly high. We're working on some possible ways of reducing it. It's just the data format doesn't lend itself to looking at the data in this dimension. It likes taking slices versus looking down through the data set. But an 80% reduction in processing time is definitely a good first step, and we hope to increase that in the future. So I'd like to acknowledge the funding partners for this project, and I will take any questions.
All right, thank you. Questions?
Doug, quick question. You mentioned that the problem with the IO is the format. How exactly is it written? Is it possible to split the file into smaller chunks in a more sensible manner, maybe?
They come in as geotiffs, and it's possible to parse them up, but it's still a very IO intensive at any level, just because of the way it's written. If the way we want to chunk it up to look down the spectral axis, it's optimized for going slicing across the X and Y plane versus looking down the Z, and it doesn't have a way of flipping axes very easily.
Any other questions, including Zoom folks? Okay, well, let's thank you.